Chairperson, thank you very much. Let me not waste time by greetings as we have already done so, Chairperson, and go straight to issues that are important. Chairperson, as you are aware that we have been celebrating Freedom Day on the 27th of April. And as we are celebrating Freedom Day, majority of students, especially young people, were arguing that they are not free because of they are still trapped in the triple challenges of unemployment, poverty, and inequality. And that is not a debate that we are ready to have, because in all honesty, they are telling the truth. But some of these young people who are not happy about Freedom Day celebration are students. And these are students who are mainly from rural areas or small dorpies. Dr. Karen, we can put it in that way in Afrikaans. Myself, I'm from a small dorp. I'm from Christian. I'm from the Northwest Province, one of the rural provinces in this country. Let me go straight to the issue that affects our constituents. You can see that we are young, so obviously we have grown through the ranks, so we will not be speaking of things that we do not know of. Student accommodation is a problem, a serious problem. I'll deal with other issues. I would want to understand with you, with your letter that you had sent on the 7th of March, are you aware of the financial implication? Let me give you an example. At the beginning of the year, students are signing lease agreements with the landlords. And the chair, you have correctly captured it in terms of the financial implication from the side of the institution, in terms of having a planned income from the side of the students. That on its own has financial implications on both sides. Now, when you are releasing on a letter on the 7th of March, when already people have signed, let's assume that it's a yearly or it's a 1-year contract, it has its own financial implications. I want to check with you. Were you aware of the financial implication that students are going to incur? That is number one. Number two, who's going to take responsibility of the financial implication incurred by the student? Between the CEO and the chair, I think my focus will be on the two of you as the both head and administrative responsible.
We can answer now, yeah.
I think that question is best answered by the CEO. Wasim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think if we reflect, right, on the cap on unaccredited accommodation, let's first recognize that it is the least ideal situation that we want to be faced with. That we don't want a situation where a student is, one, staying in an unaccredited property, two, where an allowance is being paid directly to them. So in recognizing those two things, we have to come up with a mechanism for certain campuses in predominantly rural areas to account for the fact that there is insufficient campus or private accredited accommodation here. Now, for me, in recognizing that, perhaps the debate we need to have is the cap that Nsfas has set. Is that sufficient to meet the obligations of students so that they have a decent student journey through the system? And if it is not, what is the work that we can go back and do to increase the amount to be able to, one, continue to be financially sustainable, but two, be able to support the student in at least accessing and being able to pay for a decent enough accommodation. But finally, recognizing that that amount cannot be equivalent to what you would pay for a full private accredited accommodation. Because if we pay a full amount, we are creating a disincentive for people to meet the requisite norms and standards to be in accredited accommodation. So if it means that we must go back and do a reassessment of area by area about, where it is sufficient and where it is insufficient, then let us go back and do that exercise and commit to a time frame. But I think perhaps I just need some guidance from the committee chair about dealing with what I don't think is necessarily a simple problem. How best do we want an increase of the amount? And how best do we go about increasing that amount so that at least we manage that situation for the rest of this academic year going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Honorable Kaba, I'll just stop your, because I don't think the CEO answered the basis of your question. I've stopped your time. So CEO, we're not saying that it's correct to have unaccredited. We don't want, no one wants unaccredited. Because in 2022, State of the Nation Address, Honorable Kaka, when debating at SONA, 2023, SONA, or was it 2024? I can't remember now. 24, indicated that at Letaba TVET College, there were unaccredited, well, it was, in fact, there it was just corruption. But there were, students were put in sheds. Omikuku, yeah, right? Where we were paying as Nsfas 4,000 or so. But when Nsfas looked at the application for this, you had received different pictures. So you are scammed by the institution, right? And the question there says, on unaccredited, the basis here is that in the middle of the semester, actually at the end of the trimester of TVET colleges, you take a decision to, it's the correct decision to say we must punish those who are unaccredited. We agree. Those who are unaccredited must be punished. But when you punish them on the 7th of March, in the middle of the term or the semester, at the end of the trimester, first trimester, you are creating a problem because we have students who are staying and signed lists at those unaccredited because it's what you have done all the years. So they've signed. When you take it to 2.5, somebody must pay for it. And it will be this child that your system says, they are SASSA beneficiaries, there's no one at home working. Now we are creating a situation where at the end, these students will not graduate because they owe an institution or they owe somebody. I don't know how they have this argument. So that is why the argument is that Nsfas in the middle of the term, somebody was just saying, Nsfas is like waking up in the middle of the night and taking a decision. So this is how it happened with the 10,300 students at the beginning of, in the middle of last year, where we've taken, it's happening now, CO, where you are incorrect, where you are correctly defunding students at universities who had applied for TVET cycle. Where you are correctly doing it, but your system approved them. And you made commitments to university. So the argument there is the timing of these decisions and who then becomes responsible for the shortfalls that will be there. I mean, in 2017, somebody who had one big organization had borrowed him a power of becoming president. In his capacity as president of the country, declared from 2018 would have free education in South Africa. The policy of the big organization, but it was announced by somebody. I can't remember his name now, but so we said we want free education. But the argument then is, when we have these shortfalls, and a student will fund them, take them to the end, they pass, but they can't graduate. The argument then is, do we really have free education? Because we have created these shortfalls, and it happens on university-owned accommodation that we have co-funded with them. And as far as says we are paying 5.5, they say we want 8,000 per bed. And there are four students sharing a room, literally a room. This size, I'm sure at universities they can have 20 students in this room. So 8,000 times 20, so they want 160,000 per month for a room like this. So we are creating a problem where people then say, we don't have free education because I can't graduate. So this is where the point of Honorable Kabo comes from, as CEO. If you can just answer him on this part. Press the button.
We are dealing with a graduate here. We are not dealing with an NQF level 3 person. The question was straightforward. Are you aware of the financial implication and who's going to take responsibility? You have said in your presentation, majority of students who are benefiting from Nsfas are those who are also benefiting from SASA. So I'm a child of a truck driver. I went to TVET college. I can't afford. Who's going to fill up the balance because of the problem is not on my side?
Thanks, Chair. So I think what we can say is that we recognize the challenge that has been caused both by the value as well as the timing of the decision on the cap on unaccredited accommodation. We will go back and review that. In any event, we are receiving a number of complaints around it. Of course, these decisions have financial implications, so we will assess those financial implications. But we do commit that the current situation is not sustainable, and that we will make a decision about an increase in the value so that it better supports the current system in which we are functioning. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Let me rather stick to the TVET based on what you have just said. Chairperson, you have correctly indicated that the trimester, the first one came to an end. And obviously we had students whose allowances were not paid timelessly, whose private accommodation was not paid. And as a result, some of them were kicked out. Some of them are suffering from mental health care problems. It has serious implications. I would want to check with you in terms of service student private service providers. You said that all of them have been paid. Can you take us into confidence and confirm that indeed all service providers, private service providers have been paid? Because according to your report, that's what you have said. Can you confirm? Maybe I did not hear you properly.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Through you, I don't think we would have said that all private accommodation providers are paid. I think we would have indicated the scale of accommodation providers that are paid. So the report would have indicated that close to 3,900, if we look at 2025, 3,900 accommodation providers representing 100,000 students have been paid. I think the intention of that slide...
Sorry, while we are still there, you said out of 300 out of...
I don't want to say out of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Let's avoid that then. How much have you paid so far?
2025 or 2024?
2024.
2024, I have to get the slide open again.
Both 2024 and 2025. Because we are sitting with cases whereby service providers are claiming that they have not been paid, like the earlier example that the chair has made.
Yeah, I'll give you the number now. So
let me give you an example. You've got Mangwe campus in Obet in the Northwest. They're in the Faskets, close to Limpopo. As we speak now, the campus is closed. And part of the problem is that the issue of student accommodation, it's affecting the day-to-day running of the institution because of the accommodation is mainly outside. Now, students cannot go to classes because of they have not received their allowances. They cannot access their properties because of landlords are not allowing them to access. They cannot go and write exams. Can you get the scenario that I'm trying to paint?
I completely understand. So just to provide the figures, right? In 2024, we have 2,494 accommodation providers paid 2.9 billion of representing 81,000 students. In 2025, we have 3,828 accommodation providers representing 100,000 students paid 1.3 billion to date. Now, if you take, what I'm trying to present is that you don't have a collapse of people entirely not being paid here, right? They are payments which happen every month which go to accommodation providers. The system has a great deal of inefficiencies in that it does not completely pay accommodation providers. There are many ongoing glitches which need to be reconciled to determine why certain accommodation providers get paid and why others don't. There are multiple steps in the process. So, for example, you need to confirm that a student is registered at an institution. You need to confirm that the institution itself agrees with the accommodation in which the student is placed. Yeah. There needs to be a lease agreement which is uploaded onto the portal that's signed by the landlord and by the student here. So in some cases, you'll find when you go back and you investigate that a step in that process may have been missed and that the landlord is not paid as a result. In some cases, like when I explained the Eastern Cape situation, Nsfas made a mistake. We were supposed to pay 3 months, we paid 1 month. Yeah. The point I'm emphasizing is to say, we are not operating in a perfect system. When I got to Nsfas in March, the issue of 2024 was a major issue. We received complaints on an almost daily basis relating to 2024 accommodation unpaid allowances. Because we were dealing with the start of the 2025 academic year, I asked the team what is realistic for us to be able to go back and pay 2024. On the 2nd of May, on the 5th of May, we released a communication to say we want to receive all outstanding 2024 claims through a claim process, and we intend settling all of those by the 31st of May. But in addition to that, creating an appeal mechanism to say, if I am not paid, how do I appeal that and prove my case to say, I've got Nsfas students staying with me, here is all of my paperwork, this is my motivation that I'm putting forward, why was I not included in the payment? So that as it relates. As it relates to 2025, yes, I know there are sporadic issues, but we are clearing those on a day-to-day basis. Right now, if I look at our dashboard, I see that the issues are predominantly in KZN and Limpopo, and we're working on those ones there. We're working with the accommodation providers, with the solution partners. Honorable members, there's no quick fix to what we're dealing with here. It is going to take a few months for us to be, and I apologize for that here. We did not inherit a perfect system at Nsfas, and I don't want to blame anybody, but we have to, because on the other side of this, if we pay accommodation providers who are housing students who do not have a valid registration certificate, when the Auditor General comes and presents to this committee and says Nsfas paid for students who do not appear on the database, we are equally held accountable for that. So we have to follow process to make sure. And we're following process in a very imperfect system. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you very much, CEO. Look, CEO, you might be making sense to me, but to students who are disgruntled and vulnerable, sleeping in the street, you are not making sense. I must be honest with you, Honorable CEO. You are speaking of systematic glitches. That makes it difficult for you to process some of these things. Amongst others, you are speaking of payment. I wanted to understand, according to you, what are those systematic challenges? Because one, I think it's last month, where you enormously paid student private accommodation providers fees into the accounts of students. I think it's last month, if I heard it correctly. And yet, it's March, 2 months ago. And yet again, you are continuously raising the issue of the system. I think, Chair, you'll just indicate after the CEO as to what would you do to the person who pressed enter and wrongfully paid, putting money into the students rather than into the... I want to check with you, according to you, what are those systematic glitches? And now that you are an operational person, CEO, how are you correcting it? Because clearly it's costing us and it's creating problems. I mean, if we were to tell you the stories that you have heard when we were doing oversight, you'd realize that in a way we are largely creating a crisis for this country and creating a crisis in terms of budget, because some of the students end up sleeping with older people, end up being pregnant, end up having children, end up being infected with all of these diseases. Can you clarify this systematic? Because this system that you are speaking of is costing us. It's the very system that almost costed us elections. And suddenly we saw people skyrocketing.
I don't know what you mean almost.
Thanks, Chair. So if I was to explain the current Nsfas system, as opposed to an envisaged system. What you have at the moment is largely an application and a confirmation system. So students apply to the system. Yes, it's online. They input their data. It has the ability for them to upload supporting documents to support household income. That goes through a caseworker who is able to either approve or reject, go through an appeal process where additional documents can be updated. And it has the capacity to interface with institutional systems to be able to then say, can we confirm this student against registration data? So institutions have the ability to interface with the Nsfas system and match that student against the registered course or study that they're studying at an institution of higher learning. That is the matching principle. So once a student is confirmed as registered that they meet the criteria, they qualify for payment. Yeah. Payment of different things, tuition, allowances, payment of a private accommodation provider. Now, what you then have is you have no integration between your payment system and your application and student management system, which means all of your data coming out of your student application system needs to be downloaded here and put into different types of spreadsheets. So let's take TVET allowances as an example. You extract all of your TVET students which are confirmed as registered. You have all of their individual names, surnames, ID numbers, bank account numbers, bank accounts to go through a verification process. You match them against their correct allowance value. You put that into very large spreadsheets, which are then uploaded for payment onto your banking system once they're done with the verification and the due diligence process. And it goes through a payment system. So you have no integration between your application and your student system with your payment systems in the organization. Now, ideally, in a modern day system, what you would have is a situation where all of that is managed on one system. So that once a student is confirmed as registered, their banking details are verified on the same system. That creates a payment file which runs through your bank account and makes it much simpler. Right now, we're adding 10 steps in between the process, which leads to errors, which leads to late payments, which leads to inaccuracies that are happening. I want to clarify to say the payment made to students for accommodation was not an incorrect payment. Those are students which claimed accommodation but were not linked to an accommodation provider. And therefore, it was necessary. Those students would have slept on the streets if we did not pay that accommodation allowance. We communicated that with the students to say that that payment was an accommodation allowance. That represents a small population. It represents 12,000 students out of the overall population of 800,000 here. So it's less than, it's about 1% of the students who were paid that. And we had to do that, otherwise those students would not have had accommodation for those months there, and we would have ended up with a major problem here. We mediated between students and landlords to say where students received accommodation allowance, they are obligated to pay those over to accommodation providers. But I want to say again, we are working in an imperfect system. And these issues are not going to be resolved in 30 days or 60 days. It is going to take us a number of months to be able to fix that here. What we're doing is to build in the requisite due diligence and verification so that on the other side, when the Auditor General comes and presents to MPs, that you don't say to us, we are making ongoing incorrect decisions, incorrect payments. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Khakha.
Chairperson, it's fine. I'll submit in writing. I think the CEO was correctly briefed in terms of his responses. He's chowed a lot of my time. I can't come back. I accept, Chairperson. So
Just close the mic. Honorable Khakha.